Let's continue exploring the universe within art and the art behind strategy. I'm your host, OmLedu, and my new player's guide to Minion Masters did fairly well, so I wanted to make another Minion Masters video. So in this video, we'll be going over some more tips and tricks. I also want to talk about the deck that I've been using. Then I want to show a few really good teamer games that I had lately and give some commentary about what mistakes were made and things like that. But first, I wanted to share some exciting news. I have finally, for the first time, made the leaderboards. I've been playing a lot of pre-made with some of my noob friends who just started the game, and I have managed to crawl my way onto the leaderboards. Now, one problem I've been having lately is that my elo is actually really high. It fluctuates between 2200 and 2500, but I've never even made Grandmaster. And now I have to face people that are like triple contenders on the tippy top of the leaderboard in solo or when playing with my noob friends. And so that makes it even harder for me to rank up. But if you don't know what elo is, Bad as a Fish has a really great video explaining it that I will link in the video description. But as for the deck that I've been using lately, I've been building around True Damage and Freezing. That helps me deal with Divine Shield and shields that you see in Empyrean decks, since High Marshal Rystar is one of the top played cards at the moment. Using Bolf and Stormcharger's True Damage also allows me to use Snap Freeze and Tronveir's ability to freeze things, while ignoring the defense boost that I'm actually giving them by freezing them. I'm also using Curse Bearer for big minions, and to pair it well with the freezy stuff. You know, since they're frozen for a long time, the curse actually has a decent amount of time to take hold. Now I am fairly weak against flying and hordes, so I'm using the Resonating Blast Crystal since it's really good right now. Then I've also been using Impetus Blast. Now this is one of those that it takes you a long time to figure out how to use it correctly, but it can give you a ton of value. You know, at the very bare minimum, it can take out Scrat Hordes and Propeller Hordes, or you can, push things to different lanes to get different counters. You can use it with the Stormcharger in order to activate his Storm Charge effect by pushing minions away. There's a lot of things you can do with it. Then as for my cheap cards, we're using the Elite Swarmer because he has a decent amount of health, trades well with other cheap cards, and I can throw him in front of like the Lone Scout or the little poison dudes to kind of keep them safe. We're using the Lone Scout just to give me a tiny bit of range, plus she only costs 1 if I don't have any minions in play. And then we're using the Slitherbound dudes because poison also seems to pair well with the frozen. You know, that poison still builds up while they're frozen, and it gives them more inactive time to let the poison take effect. And if I can play them behind Bolf or behind one of the big dudes, they can survive for a little bit and really build up that poison damage. And then finally, I'm using the Reboomer just because it's cheap, deals really good damage, and is AoE. I don't really have a whole lot of dedicated AoE. We do have the Storm Charge, we do have Tronveir, we do have spells, but most of this stuff is more suited for single big targets rather than like a horde of soldiers or something like that. Plus with the Reboomer, if they don't have a spell to get rid of it, it can be really obnoxious. The Reboomer can also cover hordes that the Storm Charge can't charge through. But really, I would say the main objective of this deck is Tronveir, Snap Freeze, and then the true damage guys. Just freeze them, keep them frozen, deal true damage, curse them and poison them if you can't deal true damage, and hope for the best. But as for my victory condition, the pony can be aggressive depending on what they're playing, but for the most part, I'm trying to gain mana advantage by freezing an overplay and then killing it with true damage. But starting this game, my teammate has a horrible starting hand, 2 spells plus a Spell Dancer with no targets, and then some bats, and our opponents overplayed and used Future, so they spent like 13 mana just to gain 20 experience, but this also means that my friend still has nothing to target, so he's forced to play bats, which isn't great because they can't capture bridges. And now he still has no targets but has to play something or burn mana. So times like this, since we control both bridges, it'd be best to play Fergus either in the back or to support the single attacker. Because now Fergus is going to get killed by the Masters while Bolf is needing support. I Snap Freeze, which should allow my Bolf to freeze theirs, but my partner Blast Crystals right before they push me with the Ghost Rune. And so the Blast Crystal doesn't do anything to the minions because they're frozen, but it does get rid of the gnats. But then it forces me to Blast Crystal to get rid of the ghosts and try to deal some damage, but then my teammate does come in clutch with a heal to save the day. But then my opponents waste a Bear Avalanche. So those are good examples of be careful when you play your spells, especially against frozen minions. Frozen minions take 50% less damage, so spells basically won't do anything. But the Ghost Rune was perfect. It moved my Bolf to where I wasn't targeting their Bolf, so I was going to be the one that got frozen, and we would have lost that encounter if not for the heal spell. But then we each play a wind rune, they play it to kill my reboomer, and I play it to kill the first crossbow dude to give us more bridge time and to deal damage to the building. They waste Valorian's spell on the lone scout who already captured the bridge, but then I play the pony way too far back, which allows them to play Fergus right up front to save the rest of their minions. But then I use Impetus Blast to push Fergus away, which allows my pony to get the Storm Charge again, to take out all of the minions and then Fergus while he's dizzy. And that's a good example of Impetus Blast. That totally changed the outcome of that encounter, just by pushing that Fergus back. And now we are basically tied for experience. Now they do play Flyers to kill my Curse Bearer, which they should have just killed it with their Master. The Curse Bearer's not going to do very much damage, and they still play minions into the Curse anyway. And then they play Bolf into our Fergus, and that is super bad for us. Bolf is going to destroy us. I am too slow to react to do anything about it. I should have played the Frost Rune behind their Bolf, but my partner comes in clutch with the Storm Tamer to save Fergus at the very last second. And I panicked and overplayed, which cost us the top bridge, and I wasted an Elite Swarmer and Bolf if they had allowed Bolf to target them. But they played stuff a little bit too soon, which will allow him to get some value by smashing and freezing stuff. They played Bolf to kill the Storm Tamer. Now that Spell Dancer probably could have taken out Bolf if they hadn't have Blast Crystal. But since they did, I'm going to go ahead and Blast Crystal as well to take out the bear and everything else. I did do it a little bit too late, so we did lose the bridge, which is very unfortunate. Because another way to think about this game is that if you and your opponent are not using aggressive cards, the game is just a series of exchanges that end in bridge control. So you want to spend as little mana as possible in order to counter what they played and then end up with control of the bridge. So like here, we misplayed a bunch of times and wasted tons of mana. My partner played Fergus into an empty lane. I tried to kill the healer with the ghost. My partner tried to play a Scrat Horde into that glowy girl that shreds hordes. Then I played the Storm Charger into stuff that she can't Storm Charge through. And if it wasn't for the Snap Freeze and the heal and the ghosts, we would have lost that lane altogether. And like right there, we wasted a Blast Crystal on stuff that we could have killed just with the units already present. So I mean, in that exchange, we spent like 15 to 20 mana just to control the bottom lane, and now we don't control it anymore. And then I Impetus Blast just to see if it could deal damage to that building, and it can't. So I mean, tons and tons of misplays on both sides. Like, they played the Divine Shield into the Bolf. The Bolf gets through Divine Shield because of the true damage. Then they waste another Valorian spell, taking out that Storm Tamer, who already controls the bridge and isn't threatening anything. And this is why it's nice to rewatch your replays, because at the time, you may not see your mistakes. But like here, I kill Bolf with a Snap Freeze, a couple of Poison Dudes, and a Reboomer. I mean, that's good value right there. And then my friend plays Fergus to wipe out everything else. We basically didn't lose anything in that exchange. Fergus took barely any damage whatsoever. Or like up at the top, I can spend 2 mana on my perk 3 rune and kill that Bolf without losing the Spell Dancer or the Ghosts. Now we control both bridges, and we would have had mana advantage except that I wasted 8 of it playing the Storm Charger for no reason. And so that's another thing. Just try to use as little mana as you possibly can to control the bridges. Don't worry about dealing the opponent's master damage, and don't worry about you taking damage. Unless you or your opponent are using like aggressive decks with like rammers and cleavers and building attackers, things that are super hyper aggressive, then you don't need to worry about damage. Any damage that you deal is actually wasted mana. If you think about it, you're actually turning mana into damage when you send a unit all the way to their master tower. And unless you kill them before the game is over or before you hit Mana Frenzy, that mana was actually wasted. Now again, if you're playing aggressive or they're playing aggressive, the rules kind of change. But for most decks, at upper ranks, it's just all about winning the exchange so that you win the bridge. You don't want your minions to attack the opposing master tower. Or like up at the top just now, my friend played Fergus, and the Fergus didn't even kill the bear. It was killed by the glowy girl, didn't even deal her damage. If he had just either played the Fergus in the back and let them come forward so the masters help attack them, or if he'd have just ignored them altogether, they would have dealt some damage, but he would have saved 7 mana. Whereas it was, he lost 7 mana and we took a bunch of damage. So above all, you want to avoid being overly aggressive and then, wasting a counter kind of thing. Playing something into an empty lane and letting it target the master tower is basically the same as playing something and it immediately dying. But health is a resource that you can run out of. So that Storm Tamer up at the top, shutting down that Bolf altogether was a beautiful play. But now we both have Mana Frenzy, so we need to make sure to control the bridges. I waited until that Fergus got hit by the Master Tower to play the Storm Charger so that it will Storm Charge through it, and then I can Snap Freeze the High Marshal Rystar to kill it without taking any damage if they hadn't have Stat Freezed me back. But either way, we now are looking pretty good. We have control of the top, we're about to seize control of the bottom, we still have mana to spend on counters, so it looks like this game is in the bag. Now another thing to pay attention to is, right before you hit Mana Frenzy, you want to save up as much mana as you can, if possible. You want to have 12 mana as soon as you hit Mana Frenzy so that you can play a gigantic push on at least one of the bridges to guarantee that you have control of the bridge. There are so many times that I fail to notice that we're about to hit Mana Frenzy, and I'm like playing counters and running out of mana, and then all of a sudden we hit Mana Frenzy, but the other team just dumps everything that they possibly can onto the bridge, and then we can't take the bridge back until they have Mana Frenzy as well, and then now it's just a struggle and a fight to see who can maintain control of the bridges the longest. These are just things to keep in mind. Again, just remember that health is a resource. Don't be overly aggressive. Only use spells to take out things that you can't counter or to win an exchange. Don't just use a spell just to deal some damage to an area unless you just need to burn a spell for some reason, like if you're burning mana or something like that. Now in this game, both teams misplayed a ton. Each team used spells when they weren't needed. Each team was overly aggressive when it wasn't relevant. Neither player died during the match, so any sort of aggression was actually wasted mana. And that's the biggest thing that I notice differently whenever I play people that are on the tippy top of the leaderboard. They play the bare minimum. Bare minimum. They always have like 7 or more mana, unless they're playing some hyper-aggressive deck. But in general, if they're not playing aggressively, they're very conservative. They never waste spells on just random stuff. They only use spells to win exchanges, and they play the bare minimum number of minions so that they never reach the Master Tower. But with that being said, remember that there are always exceptions. If your push is strong enough to where your opponent can't just immediately retake the bridges, then you actually turned mana into damage and into experience. But now on to game 2. So they played a stealth unit, and so one thing to keep in mind is that if you can curse the area or deal damage into the area, it will unstealth the unit so that they don't gain that damage multiplier. Any sort of damage will unstealth a unit, so that's one reason that the Curse Bearer is so good, is not only can it curse big minions, but it can also reveal stealthed minions. But now they play a Doom Cleaver, so remember that you don't want the Doom Cleaver to kill stuff. You want to kill him as fast as possible without allowing him to kill stuff. And with the Storm Tamer, remember that the Cleavers especially will get an attack when they land. So right there, the Storm Tamer allowed the Doom Cleaver to kill an extra minion, gaining them an extra mana, basically, by making something cheaper. But right there, they wasted a Bear Avalanche, but they did do a good job of allowing the Shotgun Marine to target the Master Tower. He's not going to do very much damage, and so now they can neutralize the 2 minions and then retake the bridges. And that Bear Avalanche was a good example of only use spells to win encounters or to kill dangerous things. If they hadn't have used it, we would still be in this exact same position, except they would have had 4 more mana and still had the Bear Avalanche. And the Spell Dancer is kind of similar. A lot of times it's best to use the Spell Dancer to kill something that's on their side. Something that's dangerous or something that's about to take a bridge, or to win an encounter when you're overwhelmed and your minions are about to die. Again, that's important to keep in mind is try to use your spells to win encounters or to kill dangerous things. Like just then, I froze the Zip Zappinator, and then I pushed it closer to us in hopes that Fergus could kill it. He did manage to stun us, but now he's gone, and I can freeze the big dude with the Frost Rune, allowing us just to annihilate him. Now, especially because our big dudes have rage, it is a little tempting to be aggressive here. But in my opinion, that's not a good idea. Like my partner just played a Propeller Horde and then Blast Crystalled 2 archers, and that was 9 mana to kill 3 mana and deal a little bit of damage. And with that 9 mana, it didn't kill anything threatening, and it didn't influence bridge control. Or like here, they play a Rammer and make it invisible. That's a lot of mana just for 2 Rammer hits. And I could have actually stopped it completely if I had have noticed it. But I didn't actually notice it, so I played both a little late. So it did manage to get 2 hits. But I mean, that is a lot of mana just for 2 rammer hits. Whereas now, I can just Blast Crystal this horde to save both, forcing them to play more minions in order to take him down. Like just then, they spent around 24 mana to retake the bottom bridge and kill Bolf and his support. Now they did manage to take the top bridge with the Incubus. That was kind of cool, but expensive. But here, they play minions a little bit too early. They didn't allow the Shotgun Marine to target the Master Tower, and so they didn't manage to kill him, and they wasted a couple of mana and took more damage because of it. But I misplay the pony yet again, playing him into an empty lane, and especially with the pony, if you don't get value out of the Storm Charge, 8 mana for his stats is kind of bad. And even if the heal spell had have hit the pony, Mardred would have taken him out regardless. Now that Propeller Horde at the bottom would have been really nice at the top to take out the living statue and then take out the Mardred. And I was a little late killing the archers, so only one of the props survived. And I play the Bolf just a little bit too early, so now he's running away in fear while the Doom Cleaver hits us and then the Rammer comes in. Now these aren't going to do much damage at all because we still have mana to defend. But that Bear Avalanche was really well played. It takes out basically all of our minions because it will allow the Zip Zappinator to finish off the Spell Dancer and the Storm Tamer. And our misplays when defending that advance are really going to cost us. Me playing both a little bit too early cost me a ton of units and forces me to play the Storm Charger because I don't have anything else. But luckily, they play a Skeleton Horde for my Storm Charger to charge into. But that is one problem with me running 3 spells, is that if I miss my opportunities to use my spells, I can get stuck in a position where I have 3 spells and an expensive minion, and just no good targets. So either way, I'm going to lose value. I'm either going to play a spell where it doesn't gain much value, or I'm going to misplay a big unit like the Storm Charger, just because it's my only unit and I need to play something. Now we were being really aggressive there, but because their health is so low, I thought that we might be able to push it through. But they managed to defend, so I'm going to play the Reboomer, and then I'm going to play the Frost Rune to distract the Crossbowmen, so that the Reboomer can actually get in there and blow stuff up. And one really nice thing about the Frost Protection from Tronveir with the Reboomer is that the Reboomer can actually survive if it has the Frost Protection, or if another unit has the Frost Protection. Or like in this case, they do kill it with a Bear Avalanche, but it would have survived without the Bear Avalanche. And then even though the Zip Zappinator stunned me, we managed to kill the dragon. Now they do have control of the bridges, but we still have an experience lead. Then I'm going to use the Ancestor Rune to try to take out that building, but my placement was really bad because they're getting attacked by the Masters. I should have played it farther back to take the bridge, support the Storm Tamer, and threaten the building all at the same time. But yet again, I misplay the pony, playing it right into a Curse Bearer and then Mardred, and then I should have used a spell to support it, but I wasn't quick enough and now it's dead. My partner misplays a heal spell yet again. You would need to be really careful when using heal spells into Mardred, since he auto-kills units that are under 40% health. Now it can be good to prevent, other units from running away by saving that unit for an extra second, but if you don't have any support, then the heal spell is going to be wasted when fighting Mardred. But we've misplayed so many times throughout this game that I think their biggest problem is the rammers. They've played rammers like 4 times throughout this game. We've only taken half damage, and now we're at Mana Frenzy. So all of those rammers were completely wasted. That's like 16 mana throughout the game that did absolutely nothing. Because now, as long as we can maintain bridge control, we win. And this goes back to overplay. If they hadn't have overplayed so many times, they honestly probably would have won this game because of our mistakes. But it also goes back to deck construction. Like they're using rammers and living statues, but their decks aren't aggressive. Their win condition really isn't aggression per se. Like a lot of their cards are more support related rather than aggressive. Now we are fighting over bridge control. They actually have the advantage right now because we don't control the top bridge, but they control the bottom. But I do manage to push the Zip Zappinator off of the bottom bridge, and now we control both bridges, which should seal the deal. Now we have the mana advantage from Mana Frenzy, and we can just push in hard. But again, even there at the very end, when they played the Living Statue and the Rammer, it didn't do anything. If those cards had been different, we probably would have lost this game because of our misplays. And so that's important to keep in mind when building a deck. If you want to use stuff like the Rammers, you need to have an aggressive deck to support it, or you're just not going to get any value out of the Rammers. And again, this goes back to watching your replays. That can be really, really insightful so that you can actually see what you and your opponents are doing wrong throughout the game. Because a lot of these things can be hard to notice in the heat of the moment when you're actually playing the game. But since I have 3 spells, I should have played my Slitherbound much, much earlier, trying to provoke them playing minions, so that I could find a target for my spells. But as it is, to avoid burning mana, I have to play the Storm Charger into a bad position. Luckily, I can freeze this and take out the Doom Cleaver. Now my friend used the Shotgun's Marine jump ability to not only get into a better position, but also to take out some of the gnats around the Scrat tank. So that exchange actually turned out really, really good. And when playing against the Shotgun Marine, you have to be really careful playing minions into the pocket, because he can actually hit those minions with his spread. And since that push was fairly dangerous, they were forced to play defensively rather than to retake the bridges. I do wish that Elite Swarmer had been able to protect the Spell Dancer, and I should have used the Impetus Blast to push them back to support our ranged units and to allow us to capture the bridge. That would have given me more options, where now I'm basically forced to play the Reboomer in the corner, and then Bolf into an empty lane and just hope for the best. I should have played Bolf farther back, because now he's just going to target the Master Tower, but at least I can Impetus Blast the Propeller Horde. So now, because I misplayed, I have no mana, and my Bolf and my Reboomer are just going to do some face damage, which really doesn't matter. And we're going to lose the Storm Tamer because of my misplay as well, but luckily it killed the Reboomer at least. Now, my partner's going to heal the Fergus up at the top, which is tempting because we're being aggressive, we've dealt a lot of damage, and it has Rage, but it's going to get completely shut down by those stun minions. Then down at the bottom, I use the Slitherbound as a target for the Cleaver so that I could kill it with the Curse Bearer. Then I use the Frost Rune to redirect the rest of the minions so that my Curse Bearer will be able to kill them and recapture the bridge. But up at the top, the gnats on the Scrat tank are really annoying, but at least the Stun Lancer dies to the Flaming Bridge. Getting rid of the Stun Lancer does really simplify the situation, because now our Masters can basically take care of these with the help of a Propeller Horde. But we overplayed in the corner and got punished by a Blast Crystal. Luckily, one of my minions had the Frozen Shield, so it mitigated some of the damage, but we still took a good chunk of health from that push. And my Bolf is going to take a ton of damage because they have Mana Surge. But luckily, they did not take that opportunity to capture the bottom bridge, so we still have the experience lead. And since we control both bridges, we can just sit back, save mana, and watch what they play. Since they're overplaying at the top, I'm going to Blast Crystal to get rid of most of the archers and damage the rest. Then I'm going to play an Ancestor Rune to take the Cleaver hit. Then Fergus can clean up the rest. Now Fergus did take a lot of damage from the Blast Crystal and from the minions, but we still managed to recapture the bridge just in time. Now we did waste a heal spell, but we still have mana, and I see an opportunity to Storm Charge. Now in this situation, I really wish the Spell Dancer hadn't have been played. I see why it was, it could have potentially stopped the bridge from being captured, but it was a good opportunity for me to Storm Charge. Then I'm able to kill the gnats and the Propeller Scrats with the Impetus Blast, huge value there. But down at the bottom, the Marine is going to get owned by that Reboomer. You've got to be really careful playing into a Reboomer with something that attacks slowly. I'm going to go ahead and just waste my perk 3 rune on it just to get rid of it. But we have such a big lead in experience that I don't think it will matter. Now we do have to be careful when facing Cleavers and Crystal Elves though. They can be aggressive. Cleavers hit so hard and run so fast, and then Crystal Elves have low HP, but they have really high DPS if they have Mana Surge. They're more like glass cannons. So if we misplay too much like we just did, we might end up in a precarious situation. I mean, just then, we played the Storm Tamer by itself with no support, and the Propeller Horde into the AoE girl, and we took 400 damage for that mistake. Now, life is a resource, but you can run out of it. But between the Storm Charger and healing the Fergus, we should maintain bridge control a little bit longer. Those Stun Lancers are going to shut down Fergus, except that they got Blast Crystalled and then Spell Dancer. Now that was a lot of mana just to kill some Stun Lancers, and we need to be careful not to overplay, because we're about to hit Mana Frenzy, so their only option is to be really aggressive and kill us. Which is exactly what they're doing. Now for the Cleaver and Monkey, I can play a couple of units and then distract them with the Frost Rune, and for the Propeller Horde, I can just Impetus Blast them. But if I had been more aggressive with the last push, I might not have had the mana in order to stop all of that. And especially Rage Propeller Scrats can deal tons of damage really quickly, especially against Volko, who can't hit any flying units. In this situation, I would like to keep the Reboomer alive, but the Frost Shield doesn't freeze as far as I thought it would, and I don't play both in time. So I'm going to Snap Freeze to try to save the Icebreaker, but then they Blast Crystal, killing the Propeller Horde and killing both. So I'm going to go all in, trying to stop that cleaver from getting to us. Luckily, Fergus will be able to take that out with the help of some ghosts. But they blast Crystal yet again to win the exchange, and now they have a Scrat tank with Rage and some Gnats. My friend blasts Crystals, which is questionable, but it does get rid of the Gnats, which allows me to play a bunch of units to distract the Scrat tank from dealing us damage. But then he plays a Storm Tamer way too close to that Reboomer, and the Reboomer is going to kill the Storm Tamer. But now we're at Mana Frenzy, so all we have to do is retake the bridges. I played the Pony just to make sure that I get rid of that Reboomer, and to have a little bit of bulk on the bridge to make sure that we hold it for a little while. They do kill it with the bridge burn, but now I can play both and then Impetus Blast that Scrat Horde. And now that we have a decent presence and we control both bridges, that should be it. You know, Bolf gets an additional heal just for good measure, and this game looks like it's over. So I hope you learned something from watching our mistakes. Let me know down in the comments what you did or didn't like about this video, especially in regards to the commentary. I really hope me pointing out all the different mistakes that were made, gives you something to think about and helps you in the future. And let me know if you like seeing the teamer games or if you would prefer 1v1s. I've actually been recording me doing drafts because that's very fertile for explanations. It gives me a lot of stuff to talk about, both from picking the draft cards and building the deck. So I can talk about deck construction, individual cards, individual masters, and then, show 1v1 gameplay and go over my mistakes from that. And as you saw, I am not the best player, but I did manage to crawl my way onto the leaderboards, and this shows that you can do it as well. All it takes is a little bit of practice. And the best part is that I did it with the help of my friend who just started playing this game. He just started like 2 weeks ago, and he is living proof that you can practice, study, and get better super duper quickly, and that the game does a really good job at throwing resources at you. But even still, the most important thing is not what cards you have, but how you use them. The biggest mistakes that I see new players make is being way too aggressive and liberal with their mana, spending mana as soon as they get it, and then making their decks way too expensive, where they don't have cheap cards in order to control bridges. So the first steps in getting better at this game is not what cards you have, but making sure that you're conservative with your mana, and making sure that you're not using Ritual of Servitude or any other expensive deck. But that's all we got for this episode. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. It really helps out the video, and it makes me super happy. I hope to see you again soon, but until then, I've been your host, OmLedu, sharing with you a trick or two, and reminding you, as always, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye.